that point, Bethune-Cookman pulled the offer. They rescinded the offer for Ed Reed to be the next head coach. Here was Reed's reaction with parents and other members of his staff in real time.
After playing in, what we started doing, young man? We tried. Yeah, I curse. And y'all done heard curse words before. And they got parents in here. And no, I don't want to leave. And like I told you, I want all these recruits. But they got some corrupt people in this world, some evil people that don't care about kids like I do. So I want y'all to hear the truth from me. I ain't withdrawing my name. I got the receipts. They got all kinds of stuff going on around here. Hoarding these buildings with nothing but trash in them. You understand me? And Dion was right. And I know I'm right. And they got some people in here who be snitching to their ass. And I work amongst Judas as Jesus walked with him. And I ain't have a problem with it. Because even Jesus prevailed.
Sir.
And what God got for you, no man can take.
Sir.
So Bethune-Cookman, with their religious background, they pull the offer from Reed after he went on this, rant against the school and the facilities, and it put the school, honestly, in a bad spot. Ed Reed, though, is a guy I would want a part of my program. And the fact that they reached out and offered the job to him and allowed him to accept it, it was, to me, it was a no-brainer type hire if Ed Reed was involved with it. But the way he went about it forced Bethune-Cookman's hand.
All I keep thinking when I watch that video is, damn, Ed Reed was a hell of a player.
Yeah. And, I mean, behind the scenes, he's a good dude. I don't care anything at all about him as a coach. I don't know that he should coach. I don't really care. I'm just watching that thinking, if Ed Reed is standing up in a locker room in a Ravens jersey, talking to me like this, and I'm some scrub backup defensive lineman, I am ready to run through a brick wall for Ed Reed. And I can't help but watch him being mesmerized at how just an incredible football player he was in his playing days. He was an absolute stud. Those are my thoughts on Brady
Ed
said
Reed.
he's the toughest defender he faced in his career.
I see that video and I think, Ed Reed, heck of a safety in the National Football League.
We will get into the NFL headlines. Sean Payton has concluded another interview with an NFL team, and we'll take a look at the NFL Divisional Finals that set up what's going to be a fun championship weekend. All of that and more coming up on OutKick 360 across the OutKick network.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking that we're going to be practicing the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Houston and Kansas, number 1, number 2, both lose. We'll talk with John Fanta from Fox College basketball coverage coming up in 20 minutes. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. One of these two are going to the Super Bowl, Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts. And we know, of course, Mr. Irrelevant and Brock Purdy. Jalen Hurts, a second-round pick. But two teams that have built around a formula, a system with a run game and solid defense, and they've inserted talent, of course, around Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy. It was going to be Trey Lance, then Jimmy G, now Purdy, and all of that's paying off right now for both. And now we get the showdown in Philly.
Where do you fall on describing Jalen Hurts as an Alabama quarterback or an Oklahoma quarterback? Is it where you start or where you finish?
I always go with where you finished.
I do too. There was a tweet over the weekend that got a lot of entertaining replies about saying this is the first Alabama quarterback to win something and how since Richard Todd back something. And I'm thinking,
what? No,
yeah, I'm like he's not. I don't think
is
of
Ohio
him.
State claiming Burrow.
I don't think of him as Alabama quarterback. It's where you finished. I feel more Oklahoma quarterback. So we're seeing a battle of Big 12 quarterbacks in Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts, right? If we're going to go with Jalen Hurts as an Alabama guy, I mean, he got benched at Alabama for Tua Tagovailoa, so he's an Oklahoma guy. Second round versus seventh round with these two quarterbacks. I think both are incredible stories for two very different reasons. Brock Purdy, obviously, because he's Mr. Irrelevant, and they've won. I'm counting it as 8-0 because he played 56 of 60 minutes in one game. The streak is 7 straight starts that he's won, but I really think he's 8-0 as a starting quarterback for the 49ers. Terrific story with him and what he's been able to do. And then Jalen Hurts, all of the raised expectations this offseason because the moves they made, the A.J. Brown trade, because the roster around him and how everything was perfectly set up, because of his great offensive line, because the complimentary run game, expectations were through the roof on Jalen Hurts, and he has exceeded those. And he showed again on Saturday night, Hutton, that when he's even close to 100%, he is really, really good, and that Eagles offense hums.
And how about this? Over the last 10 seasons, there's been only one matchup of Power 5 quarterbacks in which both of them threw for over 250 yards, 3 touchdowns or more, 3 or more touchdowns, also rushing for 50 or more yards and a touchdown in the same game. That was on November 9th, 2019, Jalen Hurts for Oklahoma against Brock Purdy of Iowa State. Now we get the showdown. And Purdy can become the first rookie quarterback to lead his team to a Super Bowl. There has also never been a third-string quarterback from August of the same season that has started and then won the game in the Super Bowl for a team. There have been third-string quarterbacks for a Super Bowl winning team that have played throughout the course of a season, but never one that's ended up starting and then winning. And they have the talent to do it. McCaffrey, Deebo, Samuel, Ayuk, George Kittle, and we got to talk about that catch. George Kittle, when the game's tied 9-9 in the third quarter, and the throw and catch that he makes over the seam there.
30-yard play.
Amazing. And that's where the momentum really picked up for a game where the offense wasn't doing all that much. But, Chad, the defense has the depth that I believe can hang with Philly.
Yeah, this is going to be a bloodbath type game. I mean, the physicality on both sides with 49ers and Eagles, I think this is going to be terrific. Now, if it gets to be a high-scoring affair where the other team's asked to match, I think it's big-time advantage Philly when it comes to that. But because of just the way they're structured, that 49ers offense, the 49ers defense, they will hit you. That last play is a great example. They have no time to set up whatever they're trying to do because Turpin gets rocked the moment he touches the football. The 49ers, even in a close game, they had that crucial turnover on the kickoff, right? Or kickoff or punt. I think it was a kickoff return where they can't do that against the Eagles. I'm watching that game and thinking this is a team that has to be pretty mistake-free. Even with how good they are, just the way they play with Brock Purdy as quarterback, you can't have the special teams turnover. Now, luckily for them, that special teams turnover, I believe, led to a Marv field goal and not a touchdown. But you can't have that against Philly. And that's where Brock Purdy's really excelled, is not turning the ball over. Yeah. And he didn't do it yesterday.
Right. And they're the first team in NFL history to win 12 straight games and having no more than 1 turnover in any one game. They have 12 wins during this stretch, only 6 turnovers total. And throughout this winning streak, they've had no more than 1 in a single game. That's allowing their defense to get the ball back and get extra possessions. That's the thing about Purdy. They're playing within the structure of their offense. Yesterday they're calling a pass on 3rd and 2 for him, and it's like a 7-yard completion over the middle to Kittle in traffic. And Shanahan's able to just continue to run his offense. That's the difference between the backup quarterback there and backups that you see around the league. And then I'm with you on the shootout. It can't be a shootout-like atmosphere, performance, vibe to what's going to go down in Philadelphia. This has got to be – doesn't have to be exactly the way Dallas and San Fran went, but it's got to be way more reserved than allowing Philly to break out to these early leads.
Yeah, and one thing Brock Purdy's done that's really smart is separate of the play that should have been a touchdown to Ayuk, where he rolls out of pressure, getting close to the sideline, and rockets it to the back of the end zone in the Seahawks game that was dropped in the back. He did that. He does that a number of times where he kind of gets himself in trouble, where I think he does bail out a little too quickly of the pocket, and he does these little loop-de-loos and goes left or right and starts fading towards the sideline. He doesn't throw it in harm's way. He is quick to throw that ball out of bounds when he doesn't have something there. I think that's smart in how he's been able to avoid the big disastrous play because of that. Brock Purdy is a guy who knows how good his roster is around him, and he's been good. He is still yet to have to go win a game where it's just outright have to go make these big plays.
He did it against Vegas, but Vegas they were down 10, and he rallied them back. But Vegas is not the playoff caliber that he's faced in recent weeks. Right now, Chad, the Chiefs are a 1.5-point favorite at home against Cincinnati in the AFC Championship game. How? I can't explain that. With Mahomes, we know the MRI shows a high ankle sprain. He says he's playing, but that's going to be a massive storyline throughout the week. Burrow is not hurt. That's the other thing we should factor in. history is not with the Chiefs either. 3 straight wins. And trust me when I say, even when healthy, the Chiefs haven't matched up well against Cincinnati, and they know it. Right? Like the matchup and the trump card goes to Cincinnati here with the game plan, defensively, what Cincinnati has done against the Kansas City offense. And you can't even say that KC's the team with the hot streak going into this. That's also Cincinnati. So I'm riding with the Bengals, and I don't know how they open up as an underdog, given the circumstances of the 2 quarterbacks.
I don't get it either. In Kansas City, I was looking at odds to win the Super Bowl. They still have the best odds to win it all going into this week, and I think that Cincinnati was 4th in odds to win the Super Bowl.
Last week I got them at plus 500.
That's why I love betting on Cincinnati to win it all. Patrick Mahomes, let's first state this. Hosting 5 straight conference championship games is phenomenal. That's an incredible stretch that we've witnessed from Patrick Mahomes. If they lose on Sunday, though, they're 2-3 in those conference championship games, all home games. That's not great. That's not great when you get there and you're hosting to have a losing record over those 5 games. Now, they haven't lost that game yet, but I'm watching Patrick Mahomes hobble around in that second half, knowing how ankle injuries work, and they typically get worse a week later, or at least the week of. There's not going to be a lot of physical preparation for this game. And Cincinnati's defensive plan against Buffalo, if they can do something similar against Kansas City, and Hutton, I see that line you just threw out there, I have no clue how Kansas City is favored in this game. This almost comes down to the what does Vegas know, other than what they're just expecting the betting public to do based on the fact Kansas City's at home in the AFC Championship game. But watching Cincinnati and watching Patrick Mahomes on one leg and knowing Cincinnati's won the last 3 between these 2 teams and won a year ago in the AFC Championship game in Kansas City.
Mahomes.
Give me the Bengals.
3-0 against Mahomes. Burrow's the only quarterback to face Mahomes multiple times and not lose. The other one's Brady. Brady is 3-3 against him. No one else has a winning record.
Give me the Bengals.
Yeah, same here to open. How was the Jamar Chase touchdown catch not ruled a touchdown? And we'll get to the Josh Allen as well. But that is a touchdown. The reason why you have instant replay is to take away the egregious error. And we have turned it into this frame-by-frame
Zapruder film.
Yeah. I mean, but even frame by frame, I'm watching that going, yeah, that's a touchdown.
So I was actually driving back and listening to the Bills radio network when this happened. Went back and watched it. But I was listening to this play live and hearing their description of it. Granted, Bills radio network. I mean, they showed the replay and you can hear the reaction from the Highmark Stadium crowd. And they immediately said, hold on a second. Oh, no, he's not controlling the ball through the catch. It's bobbling a little bit. And this is going to be really close. Now, they didn't say, there wasn't an immediate, oh, this is coming back. It's not going to be a catch. Right. They were saying this is going to be a very close call. Again, that is from the Buffalo Bills radio network that's clearly slanted towards the Buffalo Bills angle. I turn over to the Cincinnati Bengals broadcast in this moment and listen to them. And Hutton, they're saying what you're saying. This is a catch. It's gonna stand.
Yeah.
It's a catch. There's a little bit of juggling, but it's a catch. So
he has control of it.
It was fast. I lay all that out there to say that this is kind of what we've done with is it a catch, is it not a catch? Granted, this is through the lens of fans.
Sure.
One for the Bills, one for Cincinnati saying that. But I think even rational-minded people can watch a play now and not have any clue what happened because they've been so confused by inconsistent rulings on what is a catch and what is not by the NFL for too long. And that's a big part of the problem. Now, when I go back and watch it at home, I thought, by the spirit of the game of football, that is a catch and a touchdown. Okay?
And it didn't come back to bite them.
Let's go back and look at it instead of just letter-by-letter rule, like that's a catch. When we grow up, that's a catch. It was a catch 2 years ago. It was a catch 2 weeks ago. But now we've confused ourselves enough to think, oh, maybe that's not a catch. It's a catch.
And a great play by Matt Milano trying to get the ball out. I just felt like Chase had control of that as both feet touched and he goes to the ground. for the touchdown. Meanwhile, I think it's more confusing to me on what is a fumble now. It's a lot like, it's not nearly to the extent of roughing the passer by any means, but at least have some consistency when the play is as similar as what we saw from Joshua Dobbs in Jacksonville.
I don't look. I tweeted this out, and
it's the same play.
It was probably 50-50. I said, I'm just telling you, I've seen this with quarterbacks of greater renown than Josh Dobbs, and 9 times out of 10, probably 10 out of 10, it's called an incomplete pass. If that ball ends up moving forward at all, if it's close and their arm's coming back and it gets hit forward and the ball goes forward, they are going to give the benefit of the doubt to the quarterback, specifically star quarterbacks in the NFL, and it's going to be ruled an incomplete pass. I thought that when I saw the Dobbs play, and I had a lot of people come back and say, oh, no, clear fumble. They didn't look at it that long because it was a clear fumble thing. Okay, maybe I'm crazy, but I've seen that called incomplete time and time again. And then the Josh Allen plays happen, and I say immediately, let's see how the NFL rules this upon review. When they actually reviewed it, they didn't just take a split-second look and announce, oh, that's a fumble and it's a touchdown the other way, like they did the Titans against the Jags. This shows you that the perception of Josh Dobbs and Josh Allen are very, very different when it comes to review. And when it comes to a play like that, those were the same plays.
And they were both
I've watched
fumbles.
both of them a lot, and they're both of the same play. I mean, you could argue either way. I'm not arguing fumble. I'm telling you that's usually called incomplete. So if it's an incomplete pass for Josh Allen, it's incomplete for Josh Dobbs. If it's a fumble for Josh Dobbs, it's a fumble for Josh Allen. I'm just going with when I see the quarterback, if there's any doubt about when the ball is moving forward after a hit, it usually goes to, it's like a tie goes to the runner. In that instance, the tie goes to incomplete pass. Ball's moving forward, quarterback got hit, split second, they're going to not call it a fumble. That's what happened with Josh Allen, didn't with
Well, to me,
Josh
it's not
Dobbs.
the ball, it's the arm. It's the motion of the throw. Does the hit force the ball forward, or does the arm moving forward happen before the hit occurs?
But it's also, with the Allen and with the Dobbs play, the hit, I think, moves the ball forward, but it's still in their hand. So, I mean, you got to get a physicist on staff or something to tell me that their hand wasn't also trying to move it forward as they're getting hit hard from behind and the ball's going forward too. It's just...
I thought both the defense should be rewarded for those.
I thought it was just inconsistent, right? That's the big problem with it, is the inconsistent ruling.
No doubt. And by the way, both were playoff games. One was a regular season game, but both were playoff games.
Michael on the YouTube chat says, NFL wanted the game to be more competitive. Honestly, Bengals should have blown out the Bills. Here's the thing. The Bengals did blow out the Bills. That's a blowout. 27-10 in the NFL in the divisional round on the road is an absolute blowout. So the NFL did not get what they wanted if they were trying to do that to not cause a blowout. I think what the NFL does is they see Josh Allen, one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, and mentally you defer to them. That's not a fumble when it's Josh Allen, the ball's moving forward. It is a fumble when it's Josh Dobbs, who no one's heard of. I think that's human nature. And I think that's what happens when it's a 50-50 call like that, either way. And I think it happened again yesterday.
Buffalo's not a young roster. We're going to see some shakeup overall as they try to keep their window open. Their key unrestricted free agents coming up: Jordan Poyer, Tremaine Edmonds, Roger Saffold, Devin Singletary, their punter, Sam Martin, Jordan Phillips on the interior, Shaq Lawson. They have A.J. Klein at linebacker and a handful of others. I mean, next year, they've got to have a significant number 2 playmaker outside of Stephon Diggs, who was pissed off for greatness postgame, where he had to be asked by one of his teammates to come back into the locker room for the postgame speech or whatever that was going down before bolting, because he didn't want to speak to any of his teammates whatsoever because he didn't get the ball.
He was shouting at Josh Allen late in the game also, and Josh Allen didn't even look up from his tablet. He was looking at, didn't want to have a scene.
One second-half catch for 8 yards. Only 4 catches and, of course, no scores for Diggs on the afternoon. But, they've got to make sure that they don't age out of the window of opportunity around the talent that they have and the great coaching staff that they have.
Yeah, I see what Diggs being so fired up with that, and I think that's what great wide receivers do. That's their mentality. Yeah. I mean, especially...
But when you saw that, you knew something was off. Like with the whole dynamic of the.
I don't want anyone to mistake this as me saying it's a good thing when your star receiver is just shouting at your star quarterback late in a game or anything like that.
Those two.
I see that, and it does not surprise me because Stephon Diggs is A, great player, and B, clearly a great competitor. And he was really mad that they were losing, and he knew they were going to lose in that moment. And that frustration was creeping out because he wanted to have a bigger impact on the game. If they were going to go down, they were going to go down in a blaze of glory that he was going to be getting the football in, right? And he wasn't. So I understand the frustration. I think Josh Allen handled it well just to not engage with him in that moment late in the game.
Ignoring him.
And I also think everything's going to be fine between them, once it dies down a little bit and they move forward with their offseason.
Coming up, we'll dive back into the NFL headlines and all of the interviews that are taking place today and that did take place over the weekend. But speaking of the weekend, the Blue Bloods in college basketball, they've been struggling. We saw number 1 and number 2 go down as well. John Fanta will join us from Fox. We'll hit those headlines and preview the upcoming week of some very intriguing matchups, especially a big one in the SEC. That's next on OutKick 360.
As we move past the college football regular season, the postseason, and the playoff championship game, is there, are we going to see, in your opinion, are we going to see the same storyline going into next year? Do you think with the same teams? And I'm talking, okay, Bama, Georgia, 2 teams that are looking for a new quarterback, by the way, in Bama and Georgia. Ohio State is as well. Michigan's going to return J.J. McCarthy. Harbaugh, this NFL nonsense saga comes to an end for another year yesterday. Do you think it's trending towards where, okay, with the playoff expansion coming up too, okay, we got our 4 or 5 teams. You know what I mean? Maybe Clemson gets back in there. There's a few other. But do you feel like Kirby Smart has set himself up now where he's running a dynasty at Alabama? At Georgia, along with Nick Saban trying to run his own dynasty at Alabama.
Yeah, I think that was probably the takeaway that everybody had. Every podcast that I listened to after the game, every column that I read, and certainly what I wrote and what I said on my own show, I think we're there, man. And, I think what stands out is, one, it goes like, I think it's easy. And I was one of the people that was critical of Kirby Smart pre-national championship game last year, but they've been elite for about 5-6 years now. I looked up the stat. I can't remember it. I think it was since that title game run in 2018, outside of the COVID year, I think they've won at least 11 games every year. Now, they couldn't get over the hump, and part of it was they ran into really good teams. They ran into a historically great LSU team in 2019. 2018, they obviously had Bama on the ropes in the SEC title game. And so now they're there, but they're there with the confidence of knowing that they can beat anybody in college football. And so it is kind of amazing. They went in an 18-month span from the team that you expected to find a way to lose the big game to now, I think they're the best big game team in college football. You look at their season, what were their best performances? The national championship game, a season opener against Oregon when we all still had questions of all the talent that they lost, the Tennessee game when Tennessee came in number 1 in the country. And so I think we're there. And then I would also add, I would also say being there, and one of the reasons I was so excited this game was in LA, because I host radio on Saturdays, I don't get to cover a lot of games during the season. Just to be around Kirby Smart, to be around those players, I think that standard has been set. And Kirby said it himself. He's like, the biggest thing for us right now is complacency, because we have a chance to be really good again next year as well. So I think they go into next year. I think they should be the favorite. Every sports book I've seen, they are the favorite. But I do think there's some other interesting storylines now that Jim Harbaugh is back with J.J. McCarthy, as you said, for one more year. I think this could be it. He's never going to say it publicly, but he's got his quarterback. Ohio State's young, games at home against Ohio State. And then, like you said, moving parts at Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State's interesting with maybe a quarterback upgrade, even though they lose Sean Clifford. So yeah, I'm excited already about the narratives. But yeah, if you told me on the day of selection Sunday that Georgia's the number 1 seed 13-0 off an SEC championship, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all next December.
Aaron, we've talked about this before. When's the Harbaugh mess just come to an end? I know you just said next year, but man, we cover this sport and we hear things and we hear stuff coming out of the NFL and we hear Harbaugh's interest, and he has interest. Look, if there was a job that was really offering him, and I mean a set in stone offer to leave, I think he would not be the coach at Michigan right now.
Sean Payton has concluded his interview with the Carolina Panthers. We will dive into that coming up on OutKick 360 across the OutKick network. Switch gears, though, and talk some college hoops. John Fanta joins us, Fox College basketball host and reporter. John, good to see you, man. Thank you for the time.
It's great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. Fun time of year on that road to March. College hoops is chaotic. Parity is rich.
And it's very much so the case right now off the weekend where we see number 1 and number 2 drop. Alabama and 2 other SEC teams, of course, in the top 25. The Big 12 still dominating the top 25, but are the top headlines coming out of the Southeastern Conference right now?
Well, I would say because I think that the best team in college basketball is Alabama. Fellas, Alabama has won their 7 SEC games by a combined 147 points. It is ridiculous what they have done in the Southeastern Conference, one of the strongest conferences in college basketball. Alabama has 4 20 or more point wins in the SEC. They're not winning, they're dominating. They have the best freshman in college basketball in Brandon Miller, who I would say is the best all-around talent in the game. As great as Zach Edey's been, at 7'4", he is the King Kong of college hoops. He has been ruling the sport. He's been ruling the country. He's a giant. Miller is going to hear his name called extremely early on NBA draft night. And what Nate Oates has done at Alabama is nothing short of exceptional. For them to win all 7 SEC games by double digits. They're the first team since 2012-13 Florida that can say that in the SEC. That Florida team made the Elite 8. Alabama has this combination of both freshman talent because they've got Noah Clowney as well. They've got Jaden Bradley. But beyond those freshmen, Mark Sears was a terrific transfer ad. Javon Quinterly provides a spark. If you haven't seen the Crimson Tide play a full game yet, you're missing a lot. This team has everything you want. Top NBA prospects. They are extremely well coached, and they can cut down the nets. Alabama's the best team in the country. They lead the storylines, and the SEC is fascinating because beyond Alabama, guys, there's a couple of really interesting teams. Tennessee is good enough to make a run to the Final Four. Alabama's in the top 15. And then you have the most polarizing team in America, Kentucky, because John Calipari has got to make noise as the year goes on. The pressure's on him.
Well, and let's talk about John Calipari in Kentucky. They're starting to pick it up. It started with that big win in Knoxville against Tennessee Do you see this, John, when you look at Kentucky right now and all of the noise around Calipari that has quieted a bit? Do you feel like this is going to be John Calipari? Is he going to retire at Kentucky? Or is there eventually going to be another stop along the way for him? Because we've seen this with coaches before where everyone kind of reaches on either side the expiration date of it's time to move on and do something else. Or do you think that Calipari is going to retire a Wildcat?
It is the $1 million question, and I'm glad you asked it. Because in my opinion, John Calipari's ego, his power, his influence in college basketball will lend itself to this not being the final chapter, right? Because there's got to be a part of the equation that is, well, he's been able to achieve success because he's at a blue blood in Kentucky, the blue blood in Lexington. And let's face it, because of NIL and because of the transfer portal, the equation of winning in college basketball has changed. It's not what it was. You can't just have the one and dones. You've got to be able to have veteran players. Now he's realized that, he's adapted, and he can offer at Kentucky, their players can make as much, if not more, than anybody else because the NIL there is very real and it's present. But there comes a time where the pressure is so great in a job that it doesn't matter what you're doing. The pressure is so large that maybe it's best for a parting of ways to happen for both sides. All good things come to an end. And the fact is, the John Calipari era overall at Kentucky should be deemed what it is, and that is, for the most part, it's been a success. But I do wonder, guys, if he one day says, you know what, I don't need Kentucky to be at my best. I'm going to go stick it to everybody and do it the quote-unquote old-fashioned way with another program. I'll build them back up because I am the best CEO in America. And for all those people who don't think I can coach, well, if I can't, I'll get the best staff in the country because I know everybody. So I don't think Kentucky will be his last stop. Like I just have this gut feeling that says, I don't know if it'll be this year. I don't know if it'll be next year, but I do think he's going to end up somewhere else, whether that comes off of not having success in March Madness, which let's make something clear. I know Kentucky's got the best recruiting class in America coming in next year. John Calipari's got to win some games in March. All right. You flamed out last year to St. Peter's. The year before that, you didn't even make the NCAA tournament. This season, UK has to make some noise.
John Fanta with us, Fox College Hoops. Are you looking forward and are you going to learn more, in your opinion, from Xavier UConn this week or Tennessee and Texas this weekend?
Great question. I'm going to vote Xavier UConn. And here's why, guys. Xavier has not played the other top Big East teams on the road thus far. They haven't gone to UConn. They haven't gone to Creighton, where they're heading this weekend. They have not gone to Marquette. They haven't even played Providence. So they've beaten UConn, Creighton, and Marquette, all on their home floor. But what's been the big bugaboo around the country, guys? Being able to win on the road. It's hard, and everybody's dealing with it. Well, Xavier gets tested to that this week, and they're 8-1 in the Big East. Sean Miller has re-injected energy. He's re-injected knowing how to close back into Xavier basketball. The Musketeers are relevant again, and they're at the top of this conference. But this week, guys, you go to UConn Wednesday night. It'll be tough at Gamble Pavilion. The other thing is, I'm curious to learn more about Connecticut, who had lost 5 of their last 6 games before beating Butler yesterday. Which version of UConn are we going to get as the season goes on? The one that started the season 14-0, or the one that's been on a cold spell here for several weeks? So for me, there's pressure to perform on the Huskies and for Dan Hurley, because we thought UConn could be argued as the best team in college basketball at one point this season. What has happened to this team? You get a move the needle opportunity on Wednesday. Adamo Sanogo inside going up against Jack Nungy and Zach Fremantle. Donovan Clingan's been one of the best freshmen in America. But for UConn, what's their point guard play look like? Can UConn get point guard play? For Xavier, can they find toughness in hostile atmospheres? We find out the answers to those questions here on Wednesday night, beginning Wednesday for the Musketeers. And then they travel to face a Creighton team that, remember, Creighton was the jewel of the preseason talking college hoops. People thought this could be their year. They went on a bit of a cold spell, but folks, buy back in if you haven't already to the Blue Jays being a force come March. I like the way this team's coming on. Xavier gets tested in a big, big way this week. Tennessee and Texas, I feel like I know a lot about those teams. They're both tough. They're both good defensively, but I don't know yet just how for real Xavier is. If you could go away from your home building and win, then you're proving something to all of us.
Yeah, and going back to that Tennessee-Texas matchup, on the Texas side of things, I look at that basketball program as a whole, and I think, man, Rick Barnes did a really good job with that program for many years because no one else has had that level of success. Shaka Smart was the hot name in coaching at VCU. And when he went to Texas, everyone thought he was going to get the Longhorns the Final Four routinely. Didn't happen. Then they bring in Chris Beard, who is a great coach. Did what he did at Texas Tech, and now, because of off-the-court issues, is not there. So now that Texas is going to have an opening, two things, John. What do you think about the job the interim coach has done with this group, with everything surrounding Chris Beard no longer being the coach there? And just how attractive of a job is this in college basketball?
Well, there's two thoughts right off the bat. Number one, Rodney Terry, a guy who Rick Barnes brought in, was a part of Kevin Durant at Texas, among others, other top-tier recruits, deep runs in the NCAA tournament. Rodney Terry is Texas basketball. And during a time where Texas did not have an identity after Chris Beard gets into trouble away from the court, you have to have somebody bring the kids together. And for that, Rodney Terry deserves an immense amount of credit because he's kept these kids on the right track. And you feel for the kids more than anything. They didn't sign up for this. This is not anything that you prepare for as a student athlete. And what Terry's been able to do with this group is nothing short of remarkable. And Texas is one of the best 15 teams in college basketball still, despite their head coach having one of the all-time flameouts in the history of college sports. We have never seen a coach get involved in an incident and basically 3 weeks later, their career has ended for what it was known for, okay? The second question, how good of a job is Texas? I polled 15 coaches the day that Chris Beard got fired and asked them what they thought of the Texas job. And all 15 said it's a top 10 job in college basketball. And here's the deal. It's one of the 10 best brands. They just opened up a new Moody Center. Matthew McConaughey and his team did a ton with that. It's an amazing building. I was inside of it in December. I couldn't believe how nice it was. That's now a great resource to sell. To me, though, you still need a CEO at Texas. You still need someone who can bring fans out to games because it's a football school, and it always will be. So whoever you hire, they can't just be a basketball coach. This is a character hire. This is a hire that really matters to your university community, and a hire that comes at a time with the program where there's serious upside. Because at Texas, you could get any player you want. You're playing in a world-class facility, and you're playing in, right now, the Big 12, which is the best basketball conference in America, but you're going to the SEC, so you're going to have Kentucky and Tennessee, and you name the big brands in your building. There's a lot of appeal there. So for me, there's a deli line of candidates that want this job. I think they could zone in on Bruce Pearl if Bruce wants to leave Auburn for Texas. Bruce has maxed out at Auburn. He's done everything he could do at Auburn. He got them to a Final Four. You get Auburn basketball to a Final Four, there's not much else you could do besides winning the whole thing. And let's face it, fellas, that's not what – it's just not Auburn basketball typically throughout their history. Bruce brought them back. So it's a huge job, a huge opening. It's going to be intriguing to see what Rodney Terry does the rest of the way. And if a very deep tournament run could give him another shot to lead this program for the next couple of years. Don't necessarily rule that out if they go on a deep run and play for him.
You know, one program that can win it all we know is Duke. It is still very strange for me, John, to watch Duke basketball and see Jon Scheyer on the sidelines and not Coach K. And I watch these teams play, and even a year ago when he was filling in for Coach K I just honestly don't know what to think about the guy as a coach right now. And it's always going to be tough for whoever took over for Coach K. But what do you make of this Duke team? What do you make of the early returns for Jon Scheyer? Clearly, recruiting is not an issue for him based on what he's been able to accomplish. But what do you make of this Duke team under Scheyer?
Well, I think any time that you rely on freshmen, top-tier freshmen, to get the job done, there's going to be ebbs and flows to that process. And that's been the case for this Duke team. Now, they're better defensively than Mike Krzyzewski's teams have been in recent years. This Duke team really plays defense. Shirer's done a great job with them on that end of the floor. I think Jon Scheyer is the right fit at Duke. I don't think there was a better option to take over for Mike Krzyzewski. So my feeling on it is he's a relentless competitor. He was doubted at times in his high school career, overcame doubt. He's overcome adversity in his life from a tough eye injury in the professional ranks when he was playing summer league. And this is a guy that to me is the right call. But there is such a load of pressure on him. And when your personnel is centered on a lead guard in Jeremy Roach, who's being asked to be a lead guard and has it in him to be that alpha, but frankly, I don't know about that being the case every single game. He goes through some offensive inconsistencies. But then you're counting on Dariq Whitehead, a 5-star freshman, to be the go-to guy at times, or at least that was the thought in mind. He dealt with injuries in the preseason. He hasn't exactly put it all the way together. Kyle Filipowski's been better than anyone could have imagined at Duke. The freshman has been superb in their front court. I like Duke's length because Filipowski, Derek Lively, I love what they do. Ryan Young, who they got from Northwestern, I love their length. Their guard play has been up and down. No matter how many stars are next to a kid's name, it's hard to fully equate what experience in a backcourt means to college basketball. And Duke lacks some in that department. And I think it's the one concern going into March Madness that could leave them susceptible to getting upset in the tournament.
Is Louisville still the biggest surprise of the season thus far with their win-loss record?
So I don't think anyone thought Louisville would be good, but they are god-awful.
Yes.
I mean, and that's probably putting it lightly. Louisville should never be this bad in college basketball. Never. They're one of the 5 highest spending programs in the sport. So they're a big surprise. And you're not making a change after 1 year with Kenny Payne. It's just not going to happen. He needs to have an off season. Give him the off season that he's earned by taking the job, and let's see what he can do. For me, guys, seeing Kansas State ranked in the top 10 in college basketball is wild. They were picked dead last in the Big 12 preseason poll. Dead last. That is ridiculous to think about. Jerome Tang absolutely has to be your national coach of the year at this point. Keontae Johnson, who had that unfortunate collapse on the floor at Florida just over 2 years ago. People didn't know if he'd ever played basketball again. Here he is now at the helm for Kansas State. He's been nothing short of superb. Marquise Noel as their lead guard. They are an amazing college basketball story of guys who have either been doubted in their career, D2 guys, transfers. Jerome Tang assembled this roster from 2 people at his first practice to a team of grown men. And that team is a legit Big 12 title contender. And I would have never been able to predict that in the preseason. The Kansas State Wildcats, a top 10 team in the country, they were picked 10th, dead last in their own league. That's shocking.
John Fanta Fox has been our guest. John, thank you for the perspective, man, and enjoy the week of some great tip-offs.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. There's John Fanta there. Chad, he's hitting on one of your favorite coaches there at K-State. and Tang. And when we come back, one of your favorite topics that just will not go away for Mel Kiper. Mel Kiper has already told us we're sitting here in January, and he did it really in November. The hill he's willing to die on. And wait until you hear why he is explaining and how he's explaining that Will Levis is his top guy coming out for the NFL draft. That's next on OutKick 360.
And how long after 9/11 does your unit, the 160th SOAR, which is the most elite helicopter pilots in the world, how long does it take for you guys to figure out, okay, a plan's being set in motion, we're going to Afghanistan? Was it within days? Was it within weeks?
It was within hours.
Within hours.
So we drive back that night, the battalion commander and I, and the next morning I'm sent down in a 15-passenger van with a bunch of other planners to Tampa, Florida. And we're to plan America's response, as far as the rotary wing side of it. And by October 3rd, I was in the country of Uzbekistan preparing to do personnel recovery for the bombing campaign that was about to kick off.
And this is depicted in the movie 12 Strong. Correct me if I'm wrong, where you guys are going to fly in from Uzbekistan. This is what's known as the horse soldiers. This is going to kind of be the first wave. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So initially we're there for, I want to say about 2 weeks of bombing. And then there is no further plan that we know of. And then all of a sudden, 5th Special Forces Group rolls in. Their commander takes over the task force. We were in Task Force Dagger out of K2 Air Base, Karshi-Kanabad, and he wants a briefing on our capabilities. And so we sat down and we started talking to him about, the mountains and the distances that we can or can't fly, the way the weather is, and all these things. And he's like, gee, I wish somebody had told us that ahead of time, And ironically, when I was in Tampa, they were one room over and nobody ever connected us, because it just wasn't considered important. But now it was, especially as they heard that, the mountains were, 20,000 feet and that the weather was horrible and all these things. And so we tell him what we can do. And he goes, well, you guys are going to start doing a UW campaign, which is unconventional warfare. That's where you link up individual operational detachments or ODAs up with factions of the Northern Alliance, which were the allies that we were trying to coordinate with. So it went from there.
So, and I'm glad you brought up the 20,000 feet thing, because I had it in my notes. I wanted to ask you, in the movie, it's depicted that helicopters had never flown that high, and they weren't sure whether or not it could be done. Was that how it actually worked in real life, that you guys didn't know if the altitude was even workable?
Yes and no, but not for the reasons that you might think. So helicopters had flown that high. Chinook helicopters routinely fly at 25,000 feet in Alaska, right over the mountains there. They do the rescue mission at the top of that. I was at Mount McKinley, I think. And so it is possible, but using carrying a usable load, going the distance that we need to go as far as, because we had to trade off fuel for cargo, if you will, people. Right. And so the math didn't work out. And we're wearing supplemental oxygen, or how long is that going to last, per console for the people you got on board. So there's a lot of calculations that have to go into this that, really weren't operationally proven. I operated in Colorado all the time, but that's nothing compared to Afghanistan.
Mel Kiper loves Will Levis. Loves the guy. OutKick 360 rolls on. I don't know. So there are ebbs and flows with draft coverage, Chad, as we all know. Very cyclical. Hills that guys will die on, but then they'll talk themselves back into the player at the end of everything in April. I don't know how Mel Kiper is going. You hear about recruiting and then de-recruitment once you get a guy on campus?
Yeah.
I don't know how Kiper is going to spin this whenever some negative breakdowns come out on Will Levis, the former Kentucky quarterback, because according to ESPN top draft analyst Mel Kiper, he's not worried or concerned about any of the turnovers. Here is Kiper dying on the hill for Will Levis.
Well, I think when you look at Will, as Todd said, physically, you can draw up an NFL quarterback. He's that guy for the size, the stature, the arm, the way he spins it, make every throw, the toughness, the ability to beat you with his legs. He is a running dual threat quarterback. The fact that he dealt with adversity. It wasn't easy at Kentucky. It wasn't pitch and catch. He didn't have the elite offensive line this year. He had it as a junior, a good line. Remember, Fortner, the center, heck of a job in Jacksonville, right? Anchoring that line. He was the center at Kentucky. Kennard had been there, it seemed like forever. That offensive line was outstanding when he was in 2022. 2023, terrible offensive line. No Wan'Dale Robinson, no Chris Rodriguez the first 4 games, and he was beat up. How he got on the field, I don't know. How he finished the year, I don't know. And then he didn't play in the bowl game because he was beat up and he had to get ready for the NFL draft process. He was with that team. He was in those coaching meetings. He was with those quarterbacks. He was another coach. This guy is passionate about the game, loves the game. Now, you talk turnovers, right? Well, we heard that about other quarterbacks along the way. Once he even got into the NFL, they turn it over. That's something when you got to try to make a play. You're Kentucky, okay? You're trying to make plays. You're in Tennessee, down in Knoxville. You're behind. You got to make plays. What's the difference? You lose by 10, 15, 20, or lose by 40. Bottom line is you got to try to get your team down the field and get touchdowns.
Listen to him. There's Mel Kiper there on ESPN. What does it matter if you lose by 10 or 40, according to Mel Kiper? You're just you're a hell of a quarterback.
This goes against your rule, Hutton. It's not if you lose, it's how you lose.
I don't get this. I mean, the eye test alone tells you. And by the way, Will Levis is a good quarterback. I think he's a first-round quarterback. He's not. He's not John Elway here. This is not the Trevor Lawrence draft for Will Levis. I don't get the love for him the way that Kiper is stumping for him already in regards to his rankings. And I don't know how he drops the guy now based on that description.
He sounds like he's his godfather or something. I mean, I honestly watch that. I think, is there some sort of
like his agent
family relationship with Will Levis? Is he best friends with Levis's dad? I don't know. He loves the guy. I mean, just listen to the fawning over him physically. I mean, he's got the arm. He's got the thighs. He's got the abs. He's got the chest. He's got the lats.
Keep going.
He's got the triceps. I mean, look at him. That bicep tattoo that he flexes. Just so impressive. So beautiful.
Yes.
Everything about Will Levis is beautiful. He's a beautiful man. He throws a beautiful ball, and I love watching him play the game of football. And who cares if you lose by 10 or 40. Doesn't matter.
You're trailing.
Dude plays at Kentucky. He acts like he's playing at Bethune-Cookman, the way Ed Reed was talking about it.
Yeah.
Kentucky's supposedly this great program. They were picked second in the SEC East this year. And Mel Kiper is sitting there. I will not stand for this disrespect to the Wildcat football program that Mel Kiper is laying out. Oh, he plays at Kentucky. What do you expect him to do? They're out there. It's like an FCS program against SEC teams every week.
But
he's just out there trying to make plays. Give me a break.
It comes across as us ripping Will Levis. It's really just the love and the fawning that Kiper has for the guy. And this has gone on since the end of October.
It's also Will Levis didn't do enough for Kentucky this year. It's okay to criticize Will Levis. Yes, the offensive line was worse. Yes, his offensive coordinator was worse. But stop making every excuse for the guy. Go back and watch that Tennessee game. Some of those throws were not just, he's down big and he's got to make some plays. He made terrible decisions in that game and other games too.
Yes.
That will come back to haunt you even more in the NFL.
Now, you can point to the picks that he threw against Tennessee and say they didn't factor into the overall outcome of that game. Whatever. I mean, what was the final score? 44-6?
44-7, I think, or
7?
something like that.
Yeah. But, I mean, the overall body of work, Will Levis didn't elevate the overall Kentucky program the way that description would make it sound. And if we're already there in January, Chad, this is going to be, it's going to be tough to suffer through this love of Levis. And all of the topics, trying to tie him into C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. They're going to try to make it a trio.
I could sit and listen to Mel Kiper discuss him physically more often, though. That would be fun. Like, what else do you like about his kneecaps?
Yes.
His skinny ankles. I mean, look at this guy. Physically, is exactly what you want, not just in a quarterback, but in a man. This is what you want to see.
He's insinuating that the guy would have played in the Music City Bowl had he been healthy.
Yeah, totally a warrior. Real warrior.
He's rehabbing from injuries. He's getting ready for the NFL draft. He doesn't need to play in the bowl game based on that. No one's playing in that bowl game.
Here's what I think's going on.
It's an awful bowl matchup.
He's going to die on the hill because he's getting crushed by us and by people that know football and by fans. Every time he talks about Will Levis, he's getting drug. So his response is to puff it up and go even bigger on Will. I don't think he's in on the joke. I think he likes Will Levis. I think he's just going to go over the top to tell everyone off that tells him he's crazy for loving Will Levis. So now he's amplified it.
Coming up, Dan Snyder about to be paid. Biggest sell that we're going to see in pro sports at this point in the States. Bezos has been rumored. Are they about to buy the Commanders? Bezos and Jay-Z. Details on that next. Plus, Trevor Lawrence no longer unbeaten on Saturdays.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all of this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Just like that, the final hour is here on this Monday edition, OutKick 360. Coming up, we'll discuss the parity or lack thereof that the NFL is pushing for the playoffs. They've added teams. It doesn't mean new teams are entering the conference championship matchups. Details coming up. Jeff Bezos has yet to make a bid to buy the Washington Commanders. That is officially official that he hasn't made that bid. But reports are he's willing to sell the Washington Post, which he purchased a couple of years back for like $250 million, in order to make Daniel Snyder happy. That's the relation from the Bezos Post Washington Commanders connection. Daniel Snyder doesn't like Bezos. Of course, the Washington Post has been trying to force the hand of the owner, trying to force him out as the owner of the Washington Commanders. This goes back a ways. And according to the New York Post, some have believed that Bezos is willing to sell the Washington Post in order to make a goodwill gesture to Daniel Snyder to sell the team to him. Now, keep in mind, he would still need 2/3 majority vote through the league to approve him to purchase the Commanders. But, Chad, if this comes down to what Daniel Snyder is willing to make Bezos do, when it's all said and done, the guy's going to make between $5 and $6.5 billion off of this sale. This is as petty as it gets.
I mean, who's really winning here?
Dan Snyder.
Exactly. Like, okay, so you just can't, I don't want this guy to have his hands on my football. He's giving you $6 billion.
I know.
I mean, go buy yourself 4 other professional teams in other sports if you would like with that money that you're going to make.
He's not the only one that others have made official bids. That's the thing.
Great.
So he's taking one of his enemies and saying, okay, like, sell the Post and stop writing bad things about me, and maybe I'll consider you.
Again, let me consider you to hand me $6 billion. What a world.
That's the NFL
Daniel
right there in a
Snyder,
nutshell.
who was horrific as an owner of a team, now has the power to sit back and sit across some boardroom that I picture's 100 yards long and tell some other billionaire, prove to me why I should take your $6 billion instead of someone else's $6 billion to get rewarded for being a terrible owner in the National Football League. What an unbelievable world to live in that I will never fully comprehend. And Jeff Bezos, if you really think that, I mean, first off, if I'm Jeff Bezos and I truly don't like Daniel Snyder and I want to continue to cover him negatively, which, by the way, it's pretty easy to do, to cover that franchise negatively. Anyone could do it. I don't think you have to have a personal vendetta against someone to cover the truth and talk about how bad the organization is and how poorly it's been run by Daniel Snyder. Could have been the Washington Post, could have been anyone. Other people have covered them negatively as well. ESPN covers them negatively because they make it very easy. Because if you're covering them honestly, you're covering them negatively because of Daniel Snyder. Anyway, I digress. The fact that Dan Snyder now gets to decide who's going to pay him $6 billion and that it might be Jeff Bezos, if you really want to punish Daniel Snyder, try to drive the price down, not up. Don't be involved in buying the team. When Jeff Bezos' name gets involved, if someone really wants it, that's just going to drive the price up. If you want to hurt Dan Snyder, do anything in your power to drive the price down.
But if you're wanting to be an NFL owner, and Bezos has been rumored as showing interest in past organizations, the NFL price tag is only going up. So if you're not buying the Commanders now, well, you're going to have to set the new record when the Seattle Seahawks are for sale in a year and a half. So you're going to end up paying more anyway. So you try to win the bidding war now, just like Rob Walton did with the Broncos when he paid $4.8 billion with him and his ownership group, and everyone's going, "Whoa, you paid what for the Broncos?" Well, now we're looking at upwards of $6 billion. According to Front Office Sports. And who knows what Seattle brings in a year and a half to 2 years based on that.
You know, I've never been involved in some high-end pissing contest to this level to understand the stakes and what's going on. But again, If I'm Jeff Bezos, I'm thinking I'm going to give my $7 billion to the Seahawks family and to the Seahawks ownership instead of Daniel Snyder. Some other fool's going to pay him that money to own the team. I'm not going to give him that money. But these guys operate in a world where it's almost more of an injustice if he takes my money, all of my money, and I have to hand him my team.
Well, this is also an ownership group, though. Bezos would be the majority owner based on the report of the offer, but it also includes Jay-Z, Matthew McConaughey, and a group of others. It's like Condoleezza Rice is in on the Denver Broncos ownership group, right? Like there are other factors here. Josh Harris, a D.C. native, has been the main person mentioned, the owner of the Devils and the 76ers. He's been the main guy mentioned as to who could possibly purchase the Commanders. But this, to me, is just another way of Dan Snyder trying to get back at the paper from the town, the city where all of this is stirred up and forced him out, because he doesn't want to sell the team, right, based on his actions in recent years. But he's going to, and he's going to go out on his own accord while he can before he is voted out. And the NFL owners are sitting back going, yeah, go ahead and do this. That way we don't set precedent of voting an owner out. So they're all for it.
It's high stakes. It's high stakes, these guys. Do you know who Bezos needs or Daniel Snyder needs to rep them when they go into negotiations?
Who's that?
Shannon Sharpe.
Yes.
Because Shannon Sharpe, if anyone can defend someone and be friends with someone and fight for someone the way Shannon Sharpe fights for LeBron James, you need that person in your corner. It also helps that Shannon Sharpe is incredibly jacked to this day and could tussle with almost anyone. I am laughing like crazy at what happened with Shannon Sharpe and the Memphis Grizzlies players and Ja Morant's dad from this past weekend. Stories up at OutKick.com right now, by the way. You can read it from David Hookstead. It's a hilarious story, Hutton. The fact that you have a celebrity to the level of Shannon Sharpe getting into it with players and players knowing who he is.
Oh, yeah.
And going at it with him. This is great. Look, I don't think this was fake. I think this was real. But if I were the producers of Undisputed and Shannon Sharpe would agree to do this, I would do this as a work. It worked so well. I would do this to make it fake, to drum up support and to drum up some publicity for the show.
I don't think it's fake because the players are watching this just like they're watching Stephen A.
It's not fake. I'm saying it's so perfect, it almost seems like I would have created it. Yes, if I ran the show, I'd have said, you know what? Let's have you get into a fight with Dylan Brooks, with Ja Morant. Ja Morant's dad's going to be a part of it. Shannon Sharpe gets escorted out after getting this little tussle.
And then it takes place just before halftime.
Yeah, it goes out at halftime. He gives these quotes to ESPN. The quote's hilarious about he said bleep me and I said bleep you and you don't want this. And it's great. And then Shannon Sharpe goes back out. He's allowed back into his seats. He sits with T. Morant, who is Ja Morant's dad, and T. Morant offered up the perfect quote to sum up this deal. By the way, they're fine. Everything's fine. No issues. They were, hugging each other and dapping it up, and just watch the second half with no issues. But T. Morant, Ja's dad, you ready for this quote, Hutton? This is from David Hookstead's article. You can read it at OutKick.com. He says, Shannon didn't do anything. Hey, he was doing like we do in South Carolina. It reminds me of That's How They Do It in West Virginia, a classic Pac-Man Jones quote.
Yes.
He said, we talk our bleep. South Carolina, stand up. That's how he closed the quote to ESPN. And there's photos now of Shannon Sharpe and T. Morant enjoying the second half of the game. I love this
South
story.
Carolina stand up, and as he stands in Los Angeles, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so perfect, Hutton, this whole story. It's as if it was written into a sports movie. Like this is like an Adam Sandler sports movie, and you get Shannon Sharpe to play Shannon Sharpe, play himself, and go to a Lakers game courtside, and then almost get into an altercation with the opposing team. I love it.
I mean,
it's great.
It's great. It also, we have seen fans kicked out for less.
Yes.
Like a player can point and say, remove him, back. Get him out of here, and the player's out of there, or the fans out of there.
Let me tell you why he came back and why he was allowed. Because LeBron James probably told them, it's my boy. Let's go back.
It's
LeBron James said post-game again at the story at OutKick.com. There's a video of him post-game saying that he's basically ride or die with Shannon Sharpe and that he loves him. And he'll defend him and I'll defend Shannon Sharpe. So someone with LeBron's camp probably said, yeah, he's not getting kicked out. He's coming back. And again, it didn't lead to anything awful. He's sitting there laughing with T. Morant in the second half. But Hutton, it's a story made for OutKick, and you can read about it at OutKick.com right now. Terrific job by David Hookstead with the story. I love it.
Saquon Barkley.
We need more celebrities getting into it with players courtside. That's what I want to see more
unless it's Skip Bayless. But people were reacting different if it's Skip Bayless and not Shannon Sharpe from the same show.
Skip Bayless, being a Lakers game with LeBron there, Skip Bayless isn't coming back. If he gets escorted out, he's not being allowed back in the second half. That's the difference.
Saquon Barkley just played out the fifth-year option in his rookie contract. He set a career high, over 1,300 yards rushing. Played fantastic. Proved that he's healthy, he's ready to go. Reports are that at the bye week of this year, he turned down upwards of $12 million per year in an extension. Reports are today that he's not looking to reset the running back market, which I smirk at. Of course he is, if he can. I think the thing is, how do the Giants play this now? Because, I don't think they want to franchise tag him because that's $10 million guaranteed. They've got to decide what they're going to do with Daniel Jones. If they franchise tag Daniel Jones, that's $33 million, around $33 million for next year locked in with the injury guarantee as well. I don't see how they don't go ahead and extend both of these guys because it's more cap friendly to do it now. And I can't believe the report that Saquon Barkley turned down upwards of $12 million per season in an extension during the middle of the season. I don't know why you don't take that then, given his injury history, given the fact that you've got all the momentum on your side, and given the fact that when you start to look at these running back salaries, they're only going down, not up. I sign on the dotted line immediately for that offer, if true.
Do you think that the one thing that I'll say, and I'm not defending that decision, I'm with you, I would sign it also, is there a chance that Saquon Barkley is just telling his representation, legitimately, I don't want to talk about money in season?
Or he doesn't want to play there? It's that's what I thought too.
That's the other possibility. I don't think that's the case with him, especially now that they finally got good. And they went to the playoffs, then he probably wants to come back now with everything he's experienced before. They got a good coach. Quarterback's playing better. They go to the playoffs. They win a game in the playoffs. Makes me think he'd want to stay. I just see that, and I think maybe Saquon Barkley is just blanket statement telling his representation, don't talk money with me now. Wait till the season's over, then we'll talk contract.
Well, he's already said he'd like to stay in New York for his entire career. I don't doubt him on that. But even more so, if you've got Joe Shane, who's offering him this big extension in the middle of the season, I don't know how, if that's the case, you don't take it. You've got Christian McCaffrey, who's making, $16 million?
Yeah.
Henry was scheduled to make 12. They gave him a $2 million bump, so he's making 14 this year. Saquon's right up there, and at 12 per over the duration, and what he just played for, too. Chad, I just don't buy it that he was offered that type of money in the middle of the year.
Well, and what does that mean about the reports? I'm not looking to reset any markets. I'm realistic, about is one man's realistic is another man's flight of fancy.
So the reset, I think, assumption comes from he turned down the 12 because McCaffrey's getting 16. So to reset it, he's got to get more than that per year.
Yeah, but follow me here. One man's realistic is another man's flight of fancy. What he may think is realistic is I'm the best running back in the NFL. So realistically, I want to make a little bit more than McCaffrey.
Right.
That's not me I'm not looking at this like resetting the market. I'm being realistic about my value, which is slightly more than what the highest paid person is making. Maybe he's seeing reset the market as I'm not looking to double up someone and pay or change this thing and set the bar way up here for running back moving forward. I just think I'm the best. I'm going to get paid maybe in between Henry and McCaffrey's what he's thinking, maybe a little bit more than McCaffrey, but it could be semantics we're talking about.
It just says he's realistic. I liked everything the guy said post-game after the loss. I'm not really too concerned about resetting any running back markets or anything like that. I'm realistic. I know what I was on pace to do, but having 2 years filled up with injuries, having a season not performing to the level I know I can perform doesn't help. I think I was able to show the type of caliber player I am, the things I'm able to do on a football field. That's something I wanted to do. That was my goal. I was able to accomplish that. He did.
All well said.
And he was at peak performance around the bye week whenever the Giants were, rolling. I like the overall nucleus that they can now build around there, starting with their head coach. Daniel Jones should be a quarterback they invest in. It doesn't have to be, speaking of resetting the market, that's why I wouldn't franchise tag him. I wouldn't pay him the $33 million. I would try to get like a 3-year deal. Maybe similar to what Kirk Cousins got a couple years back in Minnesota. But you can see how they can win and build around offensive line, Saquon Barkley, and then the defense that, with some young draft picks, starting with Thibodeau, and they've got Ojulari on the opposite side. I like what New York has in place currently.
And Dexter Lawrence also on that defensive line.
Yep.
With Thibodeau, I love their young core up front on defense. Yeah, I'm with you. Andrew Thomas is one of the best young tackles on the offensive line in football. They've got a solid squad, and now they have the coach. And to have that stability at quarterback with Daniel Jones possibly and Saquon Barkley, that's a team to reckon with in the NFC East moving forward.
I'm curious to see if we need to hear further on Mike McCarthy in Dallas. But the restricted and unrestricted free agent list in Dallas is lengthy. It's a lot like the Bills. For offseason planning purposes, Dalton Schultz, who was the franchise tag player last season at tight end, he's an unrestricted free agent now. Tony Pollard, same. Vander Esch at linebacker, Anthony Brown at corner, Chad, your guy, Cooper Rush, unrestricted free agent, Anthony Barr, Dante Fowler, T.Y. Hilton, Jonathan Hankins. I mean, it's a fairly lengthy list, and the jokes are everyone's forgetting to mention Mike McCarthy as an unrestricted free agent. But the biggest question comes down to, what are they doing with Zeke Elliott's contract? And Dak Prescott. How do you get more out of him than what you've already seen at this point? Especially when you start looking at the landscape at quarterback in the NFL. And he was already the oldest QB playing this year in the playoffs. Moving forward and knowing what you've seen in Philly, New York's not going anywhere. Washington, they perform better than we would have expected based on the offseason and off-the-field distractions, plus all the injuries that they went through, and the fact they had Carson Wentz as their quarterback. How do you approach it if you're Jerry Jones, knowing that you're not getting any younger and you want to win again? If that's we know one thing about Jerry. He's not going to sit back and lose. But he's locked into this deal with Dak, paying him upwards of, $35-40 million on average annually, and they just lost to a quarterback making $750.
This is what's difficult, is his best chance to win a Super Bowl right now is to stay the course and to stick with Dak Prescott at quarterback and hope that he figures it out and wins big in the playoffs with the young defense getting a year better, and CeeDee Lamb continues to play at that level, and Schultz and everything else, and you come back and you saw a team in flashes in the regular season that looked like they could win a Super Bowl. They look like they could win a Super Bowl in Tampa in the playoffs.
Back-to-back years where they're putting up tons of points. Yeah.
But you're also just denying that Dak Prescott just probably isn't that guy that's going to win those big games for you. But the options are so limited because even if you acknowledge, okay, Dak Prescott's not going to win us a Super Bowl, we got to go find our guy, it's going to take time. If you go draft someone, what is the cost of that if you're moving up to try to draft a quarterback that you want in the draft? Still going to be a rookie. Then it leaves you with the option of what we're talking about with Aaron Rodgers. The Packers are likely, according to Adam Schefter, he didn't mince words when he put this report out. They fully acknowledge a trade's probably going to happen, likely to happen.
His deal's set up for that.
Everyone's talking about, will the Cowboys trade for Sean Payton to bring him in as coach? What do you think about the Cowboys' chances of winning a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers and not Dak Prescott? While keeping in mind, Aaron Rodgers hasn't won a Super Bowl since 2010.
He's also talking MVP.
It's been a long time for Aaron Rodgers too. So it's a tough spot to be in for the Cowboys. I just think your most likely chance of winning the Super Bowl is just sticking with Dak Prescott, even though I don't think he's ever going to do it.
Well, you can do it. I think you can do that for one more year because you have CeeDee Lamb on his rookie contract, Micah Parsons, Diggs on the defensive side. So you've got the money to where you can still allocate all your funds at quarterback. But Tony Pollard's got to come back, and now he's got the broken ankle that he suffered in the final game going into the offseason.
I mean, terrible. I mean, clearly, obviously, terrible timing to have that happen in the divisional round for the team. Terrible for him.
Yeah.
With that in their final game in the divisional round to have that kind of injury, not good.
What does it say, if anything, that 3 of the 4 remaining teams are repeats from last season in the NFL? We'll discuss that next on OutKick 360.
As we move past the college football regular season, the postseason, and the playoff championship game, is there, are we going to see, in your opinion, are we going to see the same storyline going into next year? Do you think with the same teams? And I'm talking, okay, Bama, Georgia, 2 teams that are looking for a new quarterback, by the way, in Bama and Georgia. Ohio State is as well. Michigan's going to return J.J. McCarthy. Harbaugh, this NFL nonsense saga comes to an end for another year yesterday. Do you think it's trending towards where, okay, with the playoff expansion coming up too, okay, we got our 4 or 5 teams. You know what I mean? Maybe Clemson gets back in there. There's a few other. But do you feel like Kirby Smart has set himself up now where he's running a dynasty at Alabama? At Georgia, along with Nick Saban trying to run his own dynasty at Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably the takeaway that everybody had. Every podcast that I listened to after the game, every column that I read, and certainly what I wrote and what I said on my own show, I think we're there, man. And, I think what stands out is, one, it goes like, I think it's easy. And I was one of the people that was critical of Kirby Smart pre-national championship game last year, but they've been elite for about 5-6 years now. I looked up the stat. I can't remember it. I think it was since that title game run in 2018, outside of the COVID year, I think they've won at least 11 games every year. Now, they couldn't get over the hump, and part of it was they ran into really good teams. They ran into a historically great LSU team in 2019. 2018, they obviously had Bama on the ropes in the SEC title game. And so now they're there, but they're there with the confidence of knowing that they can beat anybody in college football. And so it is kind of amazing. They went in an 18-month span from the team that you expected to find a way to lose the big game to now, I think they're the best big game team in college football. I mean, you look at their season, what were their best performances? The national championship game, a season opener against Oregon when we all still had questions of all the talent that they lost, the Tennessee game when Tennessee came in number 1 in the country. And so I think we're there. And then I would also add, from the I would also say being there, and one of the reasons I was so excited this game was in LA, because I host radio on Saturdays, I don't get to cover a lot of games during the season. Just to be around Kirby Smart, to be around those players, I think that standard has been set. And Kirby said it himself. He's like, the biggest thing for us right now is complacency, because we have a chance to be really good again next year as well. So I think they go into next year. I think they should be the favorite. Every sports book I've seen, they are the favorite. But I do think there's some other interesting storylines now that Jim Harbaugh is back with J.J. McCarthy, as you said, for one more year. I think this could be it. He's never going to say it publicly, but he's got his quarterback. Ohio State's young, games at home against Ohio State. And then, like you said, moving parts at Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State's interesting with maybe a quarterback upgrade, even though they lose Sean Clifford. So yeah, I'm excited already about the narratives. But yeah, if you told me on the day of Selection Sunday that Georgia's the number 1 seed, 13-0 off an SEC championship, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all next December.
Aaron, when's the, we've talked about this before. When's the Harbaugh mess just come to an end? I know you just said next year, but man, we cover this sport and we hear things and we hear stuff coming out of the NFL and we hear Harbaugh's interest. And he has interest. Look, if there was a job that was really offering him, and I mean a set in stone offer to leave, I think he would not be the coach at Michigan right now.
6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine, our location daily for OutKick 360. Chad, there were 7 new playoff teams that didn't make the postseason last year in the NFL. 3 of the final 4 that we're left with were here at this time last year. So while we want to point to parity and the overall goal of the salary cap, and for the most part, this is very accurate, teams are virtually the same. We are very top-heavy when it comes to quarterback play.
I think of this the same way I think of March Madness in the NCAA tournament. Those Cinderellas are great in the first weekend, and you don't want to see them on the second weekend and in the Final Four. You want to see the teams that are the best that you're more accustomed to. So I think it's a great formula for the NFL that you have 7 new playoff teams, but then 3 of the Final 4 were all there a year ago, or repeats, are coming back. Because the best era of any sport, you point to a certain time and place and you think about certain teams during that era. It's one of the reasons we loved watching Cowboys 49ers yesterday. Because depending on what age you are, you're thinking of those 90s rivalry games in the playoffs and those the marquee regular season game every year was Cowboys 49ers. The uniforms look great on the field together. If you're a little bit older, you think about Dwight Clark and the catch in 1981. That helps any sport, and it helps this sport. When we think about this time right now, we're thinking about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs going to hosting 5 straight AFC championship games. We're going to think about Joe Burrow and Cincinnati and how they're on the rise. We think about Kyle Shanahan-led 49ers teams when we look back. And
they've been in 6 of the last 12 NFC championship games. The newcomers.
Look, I think that it's good in the first weekend to have the newcomers and some fresh blood and to see some of that. And then I think it's really cool when we get to this spot and we have championship weekend and it's teams we all know.
And the newcomers to the storylines are, Philadelphia's the lone team remaining that wasn't here a year ago in this moment. They went 14-3 to get the first round bye. And then it sounds crazy, but Dallas is one of those teams that we thought could make a run based on the way they played in the opening round of the wild card. But it all goes back to the quarterback play overall. But still, I think people still raise an eyebrow to this. You have to be able to play strong defense and run the football well. And that was very apparent yesterday and on Saturday throughout the runs that we saw. And the dominance by Philadelphia on the ground against the New York Giants, where they rushed for 268 yards. I mean, they shredded them on the ground. Cincinnati, 172 yards. Joe Mixon going into the game over their stretch run to go into the postseason was averaging 2.6 yards per carry. And he averaged yesterday 2.7 yards before contact against the Buffalo Bills defensive front. Kansas City, they rushed for 144 yards against Jacksonville. And then San Francisco put up 113 on Dallas. 86 of that came in the second half, where the game's tied 9-9, and they just changed their game plan starting in the third quarter on how they were going to go about trying to win the game. And defensively, Jonathan Gannon in Philadelphia, great job. You've got Lou Anarumo, who was fantastic yet again against a top matchup offensively.
I'm surprised he's not getting more looks for head coach.
Yeah, I think he's had one interview, maybe.
Yeah, he's done a great job.
Anarumo has been great. DeMeco Ryans,
Ryans got a lot of TV time yesterday, a lot more than a normal coordinator would get, and that's in large part because Fox cameras knew this guy's going to be a head coach.
And then Spagnuolo.
This is his last run as a coordinator. He's about to be a head coach. They showed him the entire game.
Spagnuolo in Kansas City. Again, he always has his defenses playing well in the postseason. And while the trend has been offense, and head coach usually goes offense right now, the defensive coordinators have been the most valuable coaches on the sideline through the postseason. And the teams that can run it, the teams that can beat you multiple ways. I go back to this from the start of the season until now. Cincinnati can do it. Even when they're not running it well, they can run it with effectiveness when they have to. Kansas City slowly did that, and they were much better than what we've been used to seeing for a hobbled quarterback with Mahomes. And I think more importantly, Chad, the teams that couldn't do it aren't winning games. They can't control the clock. Philadelphia can certainly run it well, and they have extensions of their pass game that count as a run for them, and then their quarterback does a vast majority of why they have so much success. But the Bills haven't been able to lean on their run game at all, especially yesterday when they, in the conditions, that called for that. And it almost backfired on them. Having home field advantage really, I thought, backfired on Buffalo in many ways. Their defense couldn't get their footing. Advantage offense, especially in those slippery conditions. And then one team could run it, the other one couldn't. And that team ended up winning the game in the snow.
Look, it's when you have a team that was Super Bowl or bust, like the Bills, which we believe they were this year, based on the expectations, based on the offseason, everything else. I know they're without Von Miller, all of that. When you lose at home the way they did in the divisional round, usually someone falls for that. Is that someone Leslie Frazier as defensive coordinator? Because that was an atrocious plan. Whatever they did was not good enough. I'll take that to the Dolphins the week before, too, at home. Yeah. That's not good enough against Skylar Thompson to give up the points they gave up in that game.
Possibly, yes.
You cannot line up in the NFL and allow a team to gash you to that level on the ground the way Cincinnati gashed the Bills front yesterday. That was awful.
They're playing 3 backups, too, on the offensive line.
And maybe that's they say, hey, injuries, not his fault. He's good when he's got his players.
No, I'm saying Cincinnati was.
Oh, yeah, on the offensive line.
To your point. Now, they were down to their 5th and 6th string safeties.
I don't know that it's going to happen, but normally someone takes the fall. That just some change is made. I wonder if that happens in Buffalo.
Joe Burrow's response post-game about, make sure
get those refunds.
Get those refunds ready. That also, I mean, since he's playing with a chip on their shoulder since last year anyway, but knowing that the league was just going ahead and selling the tickets before the game had even been played, right, for the neutral site, which they've got to do.
Yeah.
But internally, Cincinnati can use that to their own advantage.
Well, and also Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk is going to have the report that we got talking about last week about future neutral site championship games based on ticket sales, based on the NFL with this trial balloon of now they're forced into doing this to see what you can do in advance for that game. I love Joe Burrow, by the way. We're going to, later this week, we're probably going to rank quarterbacks currently in the NFL, and I don't want to give away where we may have him, but he's not just elite. He's in the discussion as the best right now. I mean, it's up for debate at this point in time.
He's right there. But, see, just you mentioned the home field and neutral site. There is no way, and I realize there is a way. They're absolutely going to – I mean, they're taking away a home game at stadiums and putting teams in Europe because they can make that type of money. They're adding games in Europe and taking away home games for fans of that team that have season tickets. So, yes, they'll do it. But as if in the fabric of the game, for the open on CBS, and you have the snow falling and the teams taking the field yesterday in Buffalo, for the game that got postponed, no contest in Week 17, and the matchup that we had in Buffalo, how can you take that game and put it indoors in a sterile environment and sell 70,000 tickets to the regional fan base that's there just to watch a game instead of watch their team compete? I don't know how you take that out of the fans' hands. And what if you're not getting the bye? What's the incentive of having the first home game other than the gate for the team that, I mean, by and large, home field advantage through the regular season isn't all that impactful. So if you're the player, why are you going, if you're the coach, why are you going all out to host that one game if, in fact, they're going to take you to a neutral site by the divisional round, by the conference championship round? Makes no sense.
Yeah, to refute Gordon Gekko from Wall Street a little bit, greed is not always good. And this is an example where greed would not be good for the NFL. There comes a point where you become too greedy and you go for too much money, and it can backfire. People laugh at Mark Cuban when he says eventually the NFL is going to get too fat and get slaughtered. And they're going to make decisions that's going to affect them. I don't know that this is a decision that would sink the NFL or anything like that. I'm not claiming that. But if Roger Goodell is going to be a referee, which essentially he is, for in large part, he represents the owners, represents the league, but you're serving as referee between a lot of different sides. I would hope that some owners and some longtime owners in the league, when presented with this idea and they see how much money they're going to make, but they could also come back and say, we got to stick with some tradition. It's just not worth it to sacrifice what we've done for this long and sacrifice hosting championship games for our franchises and what that looks like on television, the way the league is constructed, everything else, just to go get the next bag of cash that could be championship games circulating around. Hutton, I don't know that anybody's ever going to make that decision, right? They're always probably going to say, it makes us X amount more, then we'll do it. And that's probably going to be what happens here. I just hope against hope that even extremely rich people can get together and say, let's just do what's best for the NFL and not do this right now and not take the immediate cash and continue playing it the way we've played it.
Well, see, I think the only difference is, the argument would be, have you not seen March Madness and the opening rounds and the attendance of those games? You want to take the fan out of it. Do exactly what they've done with the NCAA tournament, right?
Yeah. Take the atmosphere out of it.
Yeah. It just doesn't feel like the college game. Well, they still get the viewership. They still have the television money coming in, and really that's all they care about.
Well, and they get the bid money from the cities.
And the bid money, right.
Yeah, that's why they're doing it.
But the difference is the NFL could do all of that and still sell out a stadium in Atlanta on short notice.
And the atmosphere would be terrible. And you'd be eliminating one of the advantages of being the number one overall seed or being a higher seed, but is getting that opportunity to host the championship game.
The product itself is virtually the same, and you would have a similar feel to a Super Bowl-like atmosphere where, you're right, it's not the same environment, not the same energy.
Look,
it's a very corporate stadium.
On television, with the sound off, it's NFL football. If you like it, you're going to like it. It's 100 yards. You're going to watch it the same way on any field. I just don't think there's no stopping this. Where does it end? You mentioned Hutton, the games in Europe. Now, I understand why they're doing it, and I don't mind it, but you are taking away a home field environment, a home field atmosphere from teams when you go and do that. I mean, if I'm just saying, let's just print more money, why do you host any playoff games? Let's start it in wild card round. Let's get wild card weekends all over the country and have different cities bid for them and host 2 games. Host one on Saturday on artificial turf and one on Sunday. And we could charge, out the wazoo to these cities for every game. We don't have to host playoff games. I mean, there is a very slippery slope here that I don't know where it ends.
Well, the reason why they have to do that, they can't get away from that, is they have to have incentive for, number one, winning your division. And the way their schedule is set up now, they have to have their playoffs really start in weeks 17 and 18. And they need to give incentive to not rest players. That was their big point of contention whenever they moved to all this and why they put division games to end the season. So the league is never going to take that away. There's always going to be something to win at the end of the year, and that would be your home game. And I think if they end up taking away the conference championship games and putting them at a neutral site, I think, Chad, what they'll end up doing, they'll add another playoff team to the field. They were already considering that this year as one of the options whenever Buffalo and Cincinnati didn't play. One of the options was adding an 8th team and having 2 byes. And I think that's another thing they could do for incentive for playing through the season and trying to grab the week off if you're going to end up not giving them an extra home game for making the postseason. Again, I'm not for it. I want less teams in, not more. But they can't lose on any decision they make. The product crushes it.
Yeah, I hope they don't do it. I do think the product will suffer based on what I enjoy watching with football if you take away the home field atmosphere from these games. But, again, there's just no stopping the money train. So it doesn't – I don't know that it ultimately matters. They will just point to our league and our owners made this much more money because we made this decision. And that's going to be another notch in Roger Goodell's belt as a great commissioner. because of the amount of money and revenue he's raised and what he's done with the league. So, again, I'm probably hoping against hope that they don't change this, while firmly acknowledging they will probably change this simply because they can make some more money doing it.
Well, at least we're not getting the neutral site this week. I, for one, am glad that this game is not being played in Atlanta, even though we all want to see the rematch of last year's divisional round matchup between Buffalo and Kansas City.
Well, I'm way more excited to watch the Philly crowd just because we've seen Arrowhead so much in this spot.
That's fair.
That's no knock at Arrowhead. It's a great atmosphere, collegiate-like atmosphere. They've hosted the last 4 AFC championship games, so it's just not – it's so new now for Philly because it's been a little while since they've hosted a game like this that it's going to be fun to see that atmosphere.
And we don't have to go to L.A. or Green Bay in the NFC. We're getting to see this now with the Eagles, the 14-3 and the bye, top seed in the NFC, the newcomer, quote-unquote, to the Final Four in the conference championship weekend.
And always give me the possibility of weather, or at least cold weather in these games. That's no knock on the franchise.
No, that's another.
But, 56 degrees in San Francisco just isn't the same as snowy Orchard Park in the playoffs. Just from an aesthetic standpoint. Yeah, I mean, now granted, these teams, don't get me wrong, they deserve the right by their seasons to host playoff games. I'm not saying, I don't want to watch that game because it's in San Francisco and the weather's not awful. I'll still watch it, but I would prefer the threat of cold or bad weather in these games in January.
So if Philly's the newcomer as the team, have we seen a newcomer with the quarterback discussion despite the loss? We'll discuss Trevor Lawrence next on OutKick 360.
And how long after 9/11 does your unit, the 160th SOAR, which is the most elite helicopter pilots in the world, how long does it take for you guys to figure out, okay, a plan's being set in motion, we're going to Afghanistan? Was it within days? Was it within weeks?
It was within hours.
Within hours.
So we drive back that night, the battalion commander and I, and the next morning I'm sent down in a 15-passenger van with a bunch of other planners to Tampa, Florida. And we're to plan America's response, as far as the rotary wing side of it. And by October 3rd, I was in the country of Uzbekistan preparing to do personnel recovery for the bombing campaign that was about to kick off.
And this is depicted in the movie 12 Strong. Correct me if I'm wrong, where you guys are going to fly in from Uzbekistan. This is what's known as the horse soldiers. This is going to kind of be the first wave. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. So initially we're there for, I want to say about 2 weeks of bombing. And then there is no further plan that we know of. And then all of a sudden, 5th Special Forces Group rolls in. Their commander takes over the task force. We're in Task Force Dagger out of K2 Air Base, Karshi-Kanabad, and he wants a briefing on our capabilities. And so we sat down and we started talking to him about, the mountains and the distances that we can or can't fly, the way the weather is and all these things. And he's like, gee, I wish somebody had told us that ahead of time, and ironically, when I was in Tampa, they were one room over and nobody ever connected us, because it just wasn't considered important, but now it was, especially as they heard that, the mountains were, 20,000 feet and that the weather was horrible and all these things. And so we tell them what we can do. And he goes, well, you guys are going to start doing a UW campaign, which is unconventional warfare. That's where you link up individual operational detachments or ODAs up with factions of the Northern Alliance, which were the allies that we were trying to coordinate with. So it went from there.
So, and I'm glad you brought up the 20,000 feet thing, because I had it in my notes. I wanted to ask you, in the movie, it's depicted that helicopters had never flown that high, and they weren't sure whether or not it could be done. Was that how it actually worked in real life, that you guys didn't know if the altitude was even workable?
Yes and no, but not for the reasons that you might think. So helicopters had flown that high. Chinook helicopters routinely fly at 25,000 feet in Alaska, right over the mountains there. They do the rescue mission at the top of that. That was at Mount McKinley, I think. And so it is possible, but using carrying a usable load, going the distance that we need to go as far as because we had to trade off fuel for cargo, if you will, people.
Right.
And so the math didn't work out, and we're wearing supplemental oxygen, or how long is that going to last, per console for the people you got on board. So there's a lot of calculations that have to go into this that, really weren't operationally proven. I operated in Colorado all the time, but that's nothing compared to Afghanistan.
Sixth and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Just to point out, too, the parity in the league. This is just the third time in the past 35 years that the AFC Championship has been a rematch in back-to-back seasons. It feels like it's been more than that because Brady was in so many of them. But we just flip-flop Roethlisberger or Manning for the most part. So there's never really the rematch, even though it felt like you're getting the same matchup.
They alternated every year. Hey, some broadcasting news that just dropped. Chip Carey is leaving the Braves TV broadcast booth for the same position with the Cardinals. Sources tell The Athletic's David O'Brien. Carey, son of Braves broadcaster Skip Carey, but was raised in St. Louis and is the grandson of the legendary Harry Carey. And now he will be the Cardinals play-by-play guy. So the Braves looking for a new broadcaster.
It's not always a bad thing.
I work for a guy that would love that job.
A dream job.
Would love that job.
Well, you would love it too. You would crush it.
Yeah. I mean, why not? Can I come on the air tomorrow and dispel any rumors that I've taken that job? Just open with, I'd like to first address the internet rumors that are out there. Please, someone on Twitter get it started that I'm going to be the Braves broadcaster
to replace
so I can
Chip
come
Carey.
back tomorrow and tell everyone that I'm not. I haven't talked with the Braves yet, is what I want to tell everyone. Not yet, but we'll let you know what happens.
Trevor Lawrence is now no longer unbeaten on Saturdays. His record was 37-0. Now he's 37-1 when playing football on Saturday.
And this goes back to high school, right? He played some games on state championship games on a Saturday.
And never lost. Came back from, 27 points the previous weekend. And yet, this past weekend, I feel like Trevor Lawrence took a big step forward in that loss. I know that on the opposite sideline, you've got one leg Patrick Mahomes hopping around and making plays. But in the fourth quarter, when Agnew fumbled, you could still see the look on Trevor Lawrence's face like, we're close. We have a long way to go, but I'm in a good spot. I didn't see a guy that was just crushed based on expectation yet. Next year, though, they're going to be the favorite in their division.
Yeah.
He's got pieces around him. They're up against the cap, so they've got to make some decisions on guys that they've allotted money to. But overall, the nucleus around Trevor Lawrence is fantastic. And they got the coaching hire right. That and Chad, watching that, you've got ETN, who is a star in the making. And knowing that Lawrence lowering his shoulder on that one run in the fourth, down 10, trying to go get points, to me, that's a signal that he's not just here as a flash in the pan. I haven't seen Herbert do that, right? I've seen Herbert play through the rib injury, but I haven't seen Herbert in that moment for that extra yard when it came time to tuck and run like I did with Lawrence.
Andrew in the YouTube chat disagrees with you, Hutton. He says, I think the media needs to pump the brakes a little on Lawrence. He ended the season well, but Titans game was terrible. In first half of the Chargers game, he was mediocre at best. That was not necessarily a bright spot for him. But I look on the flip side, you mentioned Justin Herbert, and I'm thinking when the Jags were coming back in that game, what was Justin Herbert doing? When Justin Herbert got the ball, the chance to go win it and get a few first downs, they go 3 and out.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. There's something also to be said for throwing the first quarter interceptions, having an abysmal performance in the first half when it's your first playoff game, and you're the number 1 overall pick, and you have been 2 years prior to even entering the draft. And you play like crap, and then the second half you pull that comeback. There aren't many NFL quarterbacks that are doing that, that have the awful performance. You can describe it many ways. Well, and then actually rebound in the same game.
Yeah, it's the big difference there. I thought the whole undefeated on Saturdays thing was so silly when we brought it up last week, but I will admit that when Mahomes got hurt, my first thought was,
well, another Saturday.
Well, I guess we were right to talk about that Saturday streak because here it comes. Something's going to open up for Trevor Lawrence, and he's going to stay unbeaten on Saturday. I really thought that when he went out. I'm thinking the Jags are going to be in the AFC Championship game.
Well,
and Trevor Lawrence will remain unbeaten on Saturdays throughout his entire career. I thought that.
Also, like the way Kansas City came out and scored, Lawrence drove them back down the field, ties the game. I don't know how you don't have a better plan. And he's a fantastic player, one of the best. I don't know how you don't have a better plan for Travis Kelce, who set the new record for most catches in a postseason game by a tight end. He had 10 at halftime. How do you not cover that guy? Make someone else beat you other than Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Especially without Tyreek Hill. I thought Caldwell, as the defensive coordinator, let them down on that.
It's also strange to me. I feel like every time the Chiefs call a play that doesn't feature Travis Kelce at tight end, the guy's wide open.
Always.
When they bring the other tight end, and I'm blanking on the guy's name right now, but had a huge play.
Yeah.
In the game, and I'm like, it's like everyone just takes a collective breath and says, Kelsey's not in on this route, or he's in blocking. And dude's just running wide open across the formation. Practically like waving his hands in the air. I'm wide open to Patrick Mahomes.
Would you rather have Kelce or Kittle?
I'd rather have Kelce.
Same.
More dynamic. I love George Kittle, and he is a football player. He does it all well. I'd rather have Travis Kelce.
Coming up tomorrow, we'll begin to peek ahead to the best matchups individually on the field for the conference championship games, and we'll hit the big headlines of the day. Maybe Bezos has his name in the hat even more so with the Commanders.
Maybe he owns them by tomorrow. Who knows?
Who knows? OutKick 360 tomorrow.
Money talks.